But speaking of unfortunately passed away rappers, XXXtentacion has released the documentary on Hulu last week. Did you guys end up watching it?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, you still didn't watch it? I watched it fully. Last time I watched it, but it was like briefly. This time I really sat down and watched it, and I love it. I'm not gonna lie. I think it was really good. From the top, it started with everything that we kind of knew. The thing about this, it wasn't really new. Were you familiar with him?
Yeah. But question, was this ran through like his family, people that control his identity, or was this like Hulu owned or?
Yeah, so I learned, especially watching it the second time more thoroughly, his mother was the one that came up with this idea of the documentary. Okay. Shout out to Cleo. His mother, Cleo, I follow her on Instagram, and she's a young mother, and she wanted to put her son's story out there in a collective way, and I guess they sold it eventually to Hulu, but they had this documentary. You can kind of tell the footage is not necessarily new, but shout out to our mutual friend. He's there. Ski Master Slump God was heavily in this documentary, and so from the top, it starts off just the idea of X. It was a vlog. He started doing vlogs towards his last years of last year before he passed away. He started doing more vlogs on YouTube and talking to his fans directly more and like very more rigorous like positivity. And that's how it starts off with that like vlog of him talking about his life and just wanting to kind of change his perspective or people's perspective on him. And like he's been doing negative energy or negative things and he wants to be more positive. And then it goes into the whole rise of his story and a lot of things that a lot of people know, especially if you're diehard XXXtentacion fans. It's a very, stereotypical, but at the same time unique story because you hear the come up stories of rappers rapping very young, rapping as a kid, and then making it as a star. But his story is very unique in the sense where you see, especially with this documentary, how he used violence literally as a tactic to market himself. And it was all strategic from a young age, and to a point it got dark. Ski Master Slump got addressed that where it was like a lot of people didn't want to be around X during a certain amount of time period because he got very dark and he would just want to fight everyone randomly, and it kind of took over him, this persona of like X and like not being Jase himself no more, and just wanted to fight people and being aggressive and wanted to go live and show these fights because it worked strategically because he started as a young rapper in Florida, Broward County. His mother raised him. His father passed away at the age of 10. And again, stereotypical story, right? When his father passed away, or no, not passed away, forgive me, he's in jail, incarcerated. His father's in jail. I think till this day he's still incarcerated. And I think he had like 10 years, which coincidentally, this kid died before his father was able to get out of jail. Like, I think he's still in jail, his father. But at 10 years old, his father was incarcerated, so this changed his life. He reacted how he reacted. He basically left the house. He was doing bad in school. His mother was like, go live with your grandma. And he kind of lived decent with his mother, but then he moved into with his grandma. Now his grandma lives across the hood, so now he's a part of the hood now, fully interacting with the hood and being caught up in things he's not necessarily supposed to be caught up in. He got kicked out of all the schools. A very, very like troubled like kid, and like early on in his career you would see that, right? And then that led into his story of like how he blew up because the very unfortunate situation, the accusations that were proven right, especially if you listen to the documentary, watch the documentary, with the domestic violence case that he had against his girlfriend Geneva. I forgot her last name, forgive me. But they got her story fully. And I was shocked, and especially because his mother okayed everything. Like, she greenlit this whole situation, and it's like, I want to get her story fully. And this was someone that was scrutinized so much. Fans, hopefully not to this day, but I remember X fans like coming at her because X had this sort of like cult energy and like a very strong, like vigorous, like surrounding around him, like a cult following, and people kind of were just like yes men, like they believed anything he said, right? But this girl was a victim of domestic violence on his hands. She said her story, and she didn't want to take him to court. It was a whole sticky situation, but then the state of Florida or something still prosecuted the case because they didn't want to allow her to drop the case or the charges. So
the documentary covered all of that.
Yeah,
too.
It covered everything.
Wow.
And it showed him like now going to jail, and him calling her from jail, and then saying like, I'm sorry. I was like, and she's like, I want to drop the charges. Trust me, I want to drop them. But he's like, no, but if you drop them, you might be go to jail too. Blah, blah, blah. We got to figure this out. And then this whole situation of changing this situation for him. But then at the same time, his song's blowing up while he's in jail and his popularity rising. So by the time he came out of jail, he had no connection with her. He separated from Geneva. There was no connection at all, right? But then his career blew up. But then there was these allegations, because eventually he came out of jail. So people were like, oh, it's not true. Or was it true? She was faking it for him. Another girl lying on another guy. Or like, this is a fake domestic case, whatever, right? They were young. They're kids. Questioning all this. But then in the documentary, you see her literally bruised eyes. You see everything. And you have eyewitnesses accounts of people that heard over in the next room his aunt. Or not his aunt. I think a producer's girlfriend or like a friend heard everything and saw like her face and everything. But then there's an old interview unreleased that they dropped, a Fader interview, a brand new interview on the documentary where he's talking about it as well. And he denied everything. It was like in 2017, he denied everything. He was like, never hit her. She got jumped. I swear to God, she got jumped, this and that, blah, blah, blah. So it's like they're providing it where it's like a neutral base where you can make your judgment yourself on X without it being like a straightforward, like he's a criminal or she's.
This is from the mom. Like this is
from the mom. This is from the
From
family.
the mom. Okay.
Yeah, and everyone's scene is within his house that they built, his mom's house, and they built a studio. And everyone's scene, everyone that's getting interviewed, his engineer that's getting interviewed a lot, Ski Mask that's getting interviewed a lot. It's in the studio, like X's studio, the same studio, but they'll switch the angles, but it's all in the same house studio. And I'm like, wow, like they really, this is all in house, and they really structure this themselves, and it's not a manipulated documentary, which I was kind of worried about. I'm like, oh, you never know. There's a lot of documentaries are that way, but this is like a genuine documentary that just provided all the facts, all the clips, all the information, and you make your judgment on it. And then it also leads up to his death, where his mother, literally, I guess. So the court case was happening with Geneva still because of the state. They were still trying to prosecute him or whatever. And then he had like a court date like he had to go to. And it was 2 days before the court date. And that's the day he died. Literally 2 days before the court date. That was something else. I was like, what the hell? Because he could have faced 20 years in jail. Oh. But then he died. And I'm like, these are things that I really didn't know. Like, it was such a tragic death when he died for me because I was such a huge fan of him. So I never really dived into like more research and stuff, and I really don't even listen to his music to this day because it just kind of makes me sad. But now revisiting it because of the documentary, it provided me a lot of insight on the family's account. Prayers to Cleo. They definitely went through a lot, obviously, as you would assume, but getting that bird's eye view perspective of literally he just told her randomly like, oh, I just want to go buy a bike. Like, I just want to go buy a bike. And she's like, wow, you have so many bikes. He's like, oh, I just feel like going to buying a bike. And she was like, oh, go with security. And he's like, no, I don't need security. I just want to go by myself, blah, blah, blah. And then she made, I think, someone follow him or something. Like, he still had someone around or a friend or something. And he went to go buy the bike. And then you see him, literally the surveillance footage of him buying the bike, leaving the bike store, and then a car pulling up, a truck, and shooting him right there. And I think someone was in the car with him. The person that was in the car ran, but then he still was in the car himself, and he passed away. And the family shocked to this day, going through it to this day. It's a very tragic loss in the hip hop community. One of the biggest. I think if he was still alive, I think he could have been, because the thing is this, right? He did the domestic violence situation. I think he definitely was very guilty of it. But then she forgave him. She spoke about it in an interview, how she reached a state of forgiving him while he was still alive. And they would still interact. But then he still had to go to court, not because of her, because of the state. Because it was such a major case that legally you had to do whatever the judges say, the lawyers say, you got to do it. But she reached the terms of forgiving him, right? And it's still like, to me, it's clear, right? But factually, if you look at the whole documentary, it's kind of like, oh, it could go either way. But to me, it's clear that he definitely did some abuse to her. But I don't know. It's like, am I giving him a pass? I'm not necessarily giving him a pass, because if he was like an evil person and like you could just kind of call it out more. But if she's forgiven him and the family seemed to like move on, and then the mother was very accepting of her, especially now, it just seems like I feel like he could have had a major impact. He might have been able to be someone that was a voice for the people who might be doing this and actually teaches people how to not do this. I feel like he would have stirred it a different way, because he was so creative that he could have taken it that way, and so powerful with his actual words and his actual influence. But the documentary is out. I recommend it. I think it's great, phenomenal from top to bottom. A bit emotional, but also I feel like it's just more of like a factual situation from the people that were really around him, and I loved it. I loved it. It was tough to watch, but hey, I had to watch, especially for the fans that were dying to hear me talk about it. But yeah, we loved him. He would watch our videos a lot. He was a fan of the channel, and watching the documentary kind of confirmed it, because you could tell how he was such a young kid, and like they would just like hang out with each other, him and Ski Mask and like his whole friend group, and just do young stuff, and like they would reach out to fans and support people that supported them back. And they had this tactic where they were like literally retweet each other's tweets to like generate traffic and like generate attention to his music and clips. And it worked early on. And I was like, wow, that was actually like very smart and wise. Like they had a lot of strategic situation that behind the scenes you would know, but from in front of the from in front of the camera or whatever it is, outside looking in, us as fans, we didn't really know, but the documentary gave you that perspective. So I would recommend people watching it. Shout out to Hulu. It's called Look at Me.
They gon' love me for my ambition.